Today I'm going to fact check myself. And three months ago or so, I was pronouncing it's over, meaning the pandemic is over. Now, I was clear that the virus wasn't going anywhere, but that the mitigation, lockdowns, masking, and all that was over. I have to rate myself mostly false on that. The language I chose to say it's over, it's a simple message to convey an idea, a thought, to get people to think a different way. But my error was in assuming that the vaccines for COVID were more like a vaccine for, say, a polio, where it's a one and done. At the time, and still, there were studies that showed long-term immunity from this vaccine. And they showed it in the form of memory cells. What I think is going on with these memory cells is when you develop antibodies, macrophages, T cells, an immunity to the virus, your immune system has to first recognize it, and second, it has to develop the ability to attach to it, to the receptors. And that takes time. And while that's happening, the virus is multiplying and replicating. There's a factor of efficacy, how strong your immune system is and effective it is towards this virus, and how quickly it can develop and learn it and fight it. The way I understand that those immunities, those antibodies, they're active for a period of time. Over time, at least in this case, they've waned. But with the presence of memory cells, and one was in the bone marrow, and I believe the other was in the lymphatic system. These memory cells are essentially the instructions for your immune system. The process of developing, creating macrophages, T cells, the ability to fight this virus is quicker. Now your body can create these parts of your immune system faster than it did before without memory. It's an instruction set. I believe it can also recognize it faster. So again, while there aren't active necessarily antibodies, or there are much less of them, with the memory cells, that's the instruction set to teach your body how to turn around, how to respond. And I believe we still have that. And they didn't know at the time if it would be present for years or forever. What I think is maybe a bigger factor that they're not talking about as much now is the Delta variant. So the virus has changed. Before, it was whatever we call the original variant. It was by far the most common strain of virus circulating. There are always variants mixed in there, small numbers of them. This variant was first discovered, I think, in India, and it's become now the dominant strain. So the original strain in population has greatly decreased, and this one has greatly increased. How does that happen? Well, it's the selection process. So everything that we do, whether it's masking, distancing, vaccines, induced immunity, natural infection immunity, each of these things puts up a certain resistance to the virus being able to replicate, for you to be able to get infected and have it grow in your body. The previous strain being the dominant one, if you get exposed to someone and you inhale the virus most likely to attach and continue to replicate was the original strain. There were a small minority in there, but I guess there's sort of like a competition for the cells to attach to. When you add a mask or when you put some immunities in there, then that essentially filters out the majority, and we saw the infections decline. But then we saw them come back with a different variant. Well, that's because this smaller, now the minority variant that is better able to survive. It's better able to get past whether it's the mask or the immunities or whatever. that starts to spread, and it can start out relatively slowly, but the more and more of them that are created and the more people that get them, the faster it spreads. So it may start out, as a slow trend line, and then it kind of goes up exponentially. So that's how the selection process works. There are always multiple variants now. So if you get infected now, you can pretty much guarantee you've got the Delta variant. They're not talking so much about that any longer. And it may be because the more you talk about the Delta variant evading the vax to some extent, the more you undermine the vax. So I think that might be why the rhetoric has shifted. The flu. We have influenza. There are different variants every season. We never hear about those. They're documented. They're out there, but nobody reports them. We only know it as the flu. So they're kind of taking the same tack now with COVID, and they're only talking about, okay, look at how many cases are spreading. We're talking about boosters, and, different countries are doing different things with lockdowns and whatnot. But they're only talking about it as COVID-19 generically. And again, I think that's because the more they talk about the fact that it's evading the vaccine, the more they kind of take away the rationale. Hey, you need to get vaccinated so that you don't spread the virus. Well, if it's evading and I'm able to get infected and transmit, maybe I don't get ill from it. But your argument that my vaccination status affects you, it just dies. But that's what's happening. And one of the big pieces of evidence I believe supports that is the rise in children this time around, young children. Many more young children are getting infected, and they've never been vaccinated. So again, I believe it's the Delta variant that's able to evade the front line of defense in children. But again, it seems like the vast majority are very mild, very short-lived illness. And I did a video on that, how I caught that COVID. That's from my grandchildren. You can check that out. So as we sit today, we have a variant that's at least partially evading the vax. So now the virus can transmit more. That's what it wants to do. So, yeah, I would say I was mostly wrong in saying it was over, and that's the reason, because I mistook the vax. I think we need to look at these vaccines more like a flu shot, where every season there's a new variant, there's a new shot. So I think this is a respiratory virus, and for people to think about it in terms of one of these polio or other viruses that we completely eradicated through vaccination, I don't think we're going to see that with COVID. I think COVID is going to be with us. I think most experts seem to think that it will reduce in virulence. The illness will become more and more mild. The level of transmission will continue probably to be high. I think our population, we're going to develop a combination of immunity from becoming exposed to the virus itself and infected, along with vaccination. So I think it's a combination of those things. So essentially, we have to evolve. Our immune systems have to evolve along with the virus evolving. And, so we kind of have to learn to live together. I think some of the countries who had done the extreme lockdown measures, New Zealand being one, they were having problems because then when they would open up a little bit, the virus would circulate and they'd close down. I think it puts them at a disadvantage because other countries have a certain level of population immunity through exposure. If the virus is evading the vaccine and you have a more robust immune response from the actual exposure to the virus, these countries are kind of trapping themselves by not allowing their people to have some level of exposure. Being right or wrong it really doesn't matter. A lot of people seem to think, hey, I was right. Great. Wonderful. Sometimes you can be right for the wrong reasons. That's not good because you haven't improved in your knowledge and decision making. If you just accept the fact that, hey, I got this one right by luck, I didn't really learn anything. My assumptions were all wrong. The important thing is, what were your assumptions and how did you come to your conclusions? And then if you recognize what you were thinking, what your assumptions were at the time, you make a decision or a pronouncement, If some of those things change, then you can change your thinking right along with it. If all you do is make it about being right or wrong, I mean, you can be wrong and be better off because you learn from why you were wrong and you get better and smarter and better equipped to deal with whatever the circumstance is. So, if you're wrong and it frustrates you and you just give up, that's bad. If you're right for the wrong reasons, even though your assumptions were all wrong because your logic was flawed or something, you come to the right conclusion by chance, well, that's no good either. So always look at yourself and don't be afraid to fact check yourself and say, hey, I was wrong. Here's why I was wrong. Here's what I thought at the time. And you get better. So thanks for listening. Like, subscribe if you would, and I'll talk to you soon.